Picture this. You wake up, go to work, earn a paycheck, and every single dollar of it is yours. No withholding, no April deadline, no line on your pay stub taking a bite before you even see the money. That wasn't a fantasy. That was ordinary life in the United States for 124 straight years. So here's the question that should stop you in your tracks. If the government wasn't taking a cut of every paycheck in the country, how did it pay for anything at all? How did it fund an army, buy entire territories, and stitch together a continent-sized nation without ever touching your income? The answer involves a president leading troops into battle against his own citizens, a man tarred and feathered and left in the woods, and a single Supreme Court ruling that set off a fight lasting nearly 20 years. Let's get into it. Following the Revolutionary War, the United States faced $77 million in public debt. Under the Articles of Confederation, the central government could only request funds from the states, which routinely ignored those requests. This left veteran soldiers unpaid, sparking the Newburgh Conspiracy mutiny threat. The fiscal crisis forced a stronger constitutional structure, but the 1787 document restricted direct levies, declaring that direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states by population. This formula, tied to slavery through the 3/5 clause, made a direct tax on individual income functionally unworkable, beginning a 124-year era with no permanent federal income tax system. British cloth, French wine, and Caribbean sugar. At major harbors, these imported goods met the first practical solution to the nation's empty treasury. The Tariff Act of 1789, just 3 pages long, combined tonnage duties on ships with import taxes on cargo. Collected at the docks when goods entered the country, the tax avoided any need for a nationwide bureaucracy. Alexander Hamilton designed this system to do double duty, generate cash, and shield young American industries from foreign competition. This indirect mechanism succeeded. Treasury records indicate federal revenue nearly tripled within a decade, though historians note that inconsistent early bookkeeping makes exact calculations difficult. From 1790 to 1860, tariffs supplied roughly 9/10 of all federal revenue, fluctuating with the tide of international trade. Yet, this reliance on global commerce carried a structural vulnerability. The system left the Treasury exposed to a single question: what would happen if international conflict choked the harbors and the government needed money faster than trade could provide it? In July 1791, Congress enacted the first nationwide internal tax, a flat excise of 20 cents per gallon on distilled spirits. On the western frontier, where cash was scarce, farmers distilled surplus grain into whiskey to trade, transport, and pay debts. This uniform levy fell heavily on these small producers, taxing their primary currency. Resistance turned violent. On September 6, 1791, a crowd assaulted collector Robert Johnson in western Pennsylvania, stealing his tax ledger. By 1794, David Bradford led thousands of armed farmers near Pittsburgh, burning the home of collector John Neville. President George Washington responded by deploying 13,000 militia members to enforce federal law in the field. Thomas Jefferson repealed the tax in 1802, proving that while internal enforcement was possible, its political cost made other revenue sources far more attractive. To avoid unpopular internal levies, the federal government turned to a transaction-based funding engine, selling the continent itself. The Land Ordinance of 1785 established a grid system to survey and price Western territory, which initially sold at $2 an acre. In 1820, Congress lowered the minimum price to $1.25. This process turned millions of acres of native homelands, acquired through unequal treaties and forced dispossessions, like the 1835 Treaty of New Echota, into federal cash. By 1835, these one-time sales helped eliminate the national debt entirely. Unlike a recurring annual tax, however, this model depended on an expanding frontier that would eventually run out. With the secession of southern states in 1861, customs receipts collapsed as Confederate forces seized major ports. Facing a catastrophic Treasury deficit, Treasury Secretary Salmon P. Chase proposed the nation's first income tax. The Revenue Act of 1861 levied a flat 3% tax on incomes over $800, but lacked any practical collection mechanism. To resolve this, Congress passed the Revenue Act of 1862, establishing a progressive schedule with a 3% tax on incomes over $600 and 5% on those exceeding $10,000. President Lincoln appointed George S. Boutwell as the first Commissioner of Internal Revenue to build an enforcement system. Within months, a small Treasury office expanded into a national network of thousands of collectors, establishing the bureaucratic ancestor of today's IRS. While this administrative machinery became a permanent fixture of government, the income tax law itself remained temporary. After the war ended, political opposition grew, and Congress repealed the tax in 1872. By the late 19th century, the tariff system faced a bitter geographical and social divide. High protective tariffs, while shielding domestic industrialists, drove up the cost of basic goods for millions of Midwestern farmers and urban workers. This regressive system extracted a similar financial toll from a factory hand as it did from a Gilded Age financier. To shift this fiscal burden, Congress passed the Wilson-Gorman Tariff Act of 1994. The law bypassed traditional customs duties by introducing a peacetime 2% tax on individual incomes exceeding $4,000, a threshold that targeted only the wealthiest citizens. The reform was short-lived. In 1995, the Supreme Court struck down the tax in Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust Company. In a narrow 5-4 decision, Chief Justice Melville Fuller's majority concluded that taxing income derived from real estate or personal property, such as rents, interest, and dividends, was constitutionally equivalent to taxing the property itself. Because this direct tax was not apportioned among the states by population, it was unconstitutional. Dissenting justices argued that the ruling overturned a century of legal precedent, shielding accumulated wealth. The Pollock decision left Congress's general taxing power intact, but completely blocked the legal path to taxing investment income, initiating a 20-year political impasse. In June 1909, President William Howard Taft broke the political deadlock, sending a special message to Congress that transformed a populist campaign demand into a presidential constitutional project. By July, the joint resolution passed the Senate 77-0 and the House by a vast majority, starting a march through state legislatures. On February 3, 1913, Delaware, New Mexico, and Wyoming provided the final necessary ratifications. Secretary of State Philander Knox certified the 16th Amendment on February 25th, giving Congress the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes, from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states. The amendment did not set tax rates. It simply removed the population allocation barrier. While the Revenue Act of 1913 established the initial structure, World War I quickly pushed rates into double digits, expanding the taxpayer base. During World War II, the current Tax Payment Act of 1943 introduced automatic payroll withholding, removing the tax before paychecks reached workers. This routine, automatic extraction, sealed the administrative and psychological point of no return. Subscribe for more historical investigations into how government power actually works. For over a century, federal funding possessed a natural ceiling, restricted by the volume of physical goods crossing the nation's borders. The new fiscal system shattered this limit by tying public revenue directly to the continuous flow of domestic wages and economic earnings. According to scholar Ajay Mehrotra, this expanded fiscal capacity did not directly create modern social programs, but it established the financial foundation that made Social Security and Medicare possible. Today, Congressional Research Service data shows that individual income and payroll taxes generate 85 to 90% of all federal receipts, while tariffs have shrunk to a tiny fraction. This shift permanently redefined the scale and reach of federal power. Today, the federal treasury no longer relies on physical goods or vanishing frontiers. It relies directly on your daily labor. By claiming a permanent share of your paycheck, the modern state transformed citizens into its primary financial engine.